Reality TV is not easy to make.
The clock is always ticking.
20 of them totally suck, but you have to edit them anyway because no one's going to believe that they suck.
Actually, what it's about enabling creativity.
Working through that footage is, almost impossible.
And if we can help speed through the pain part and get to the joy part and the fun part, then I think we're doing our job.
Matt came up with this awesome show called Too Cute, which was just about puppies.
But anyway.
Hi, and welcome to Making the Media. My name's Craig Wilson. We're back with Season 6, and this time with a new look. Yes, we're now available as a vodcast for the first time ever, as well as a podcast on all your favourite platforms. And I also have a new co-presenter, Ray Thompson. Ray, please say hi and introduce yourself.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me join the show. My name is Ray Thompson, Senior Director here at Avid for Partners and Alliances, and it's great to be here.
Yep, it's great to have you, Ray, and looking forward to sharing all the presentation duties with you this season and beyond. So, Ray, let's get to it. What are we talking about today?
Well, today it's pretty exciting because, as many of you know, working in reality TV, one of the big challenges is dealing with the sheer volume of content that comes from tens, even hundreds of cameras that basically shoot hundreds of hours of content. And basically getting through that content can be very time consuming. Well, the guys at Quickture have created a solution that leverages AI to basically automate the creation of transcripts, which can then be used to create not just cuts-only sequences, but also storylines, which is often a challenge because, of course, we know in reality TV there is no script. And Quickture helps you develop those very quickly with multiple different versions. So a really exciting technology, and it's available as a panel in Media Composer.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So we're going to begin speaking with Matt Hanna and Irad Eyal from Quickture, and this really is one of the hottest tickets in post-production at the moment. You had a little bit about them in the introduction, but we're going to find out a whole lot more. And who are these guys? What do they know about post-production? Well, they know a ton, actually. So let's start out by finding out a bit more about them, beginning with Irad.
Matt and I have both been reality TV producers, executives, creators for, 25 years. Matt was an executive at VH1 during sort of like the golden age of VH1. And I was producing shows in New York for a bunch of different companies. We met up at a company called True Entertainment, which is now called Truly Original, which is now part of Banijay, which is, one of the biggest conglomerates, production companies in the world. And we produced a ton of different shows there, lots of Real Housewives. Matt came up with this awesome show called Too Cute, which was just about puppies. And then Matt went off to run programming at Esquire Network. I created a company called Haymaker. So we really come from the background of having made shows and, what I consider to be in some ways the hardest kinds of shows to make. I don't want to brag, but, reality TV is not easy to make.
Yeah. And when I got to VH1, so Irad and I both lived through not just the golden era of VH1, but the golden era and the full cycle of reality TV. We were there when it was beginning. We were there when it's peaked, and unfortunately, we've been a part of watching it go on a bit of its decline. But yeah, so I was mostly an executive. The 10 years that I was at VH1. 5 years for NBC Universal. In between that, working for different production companies. And then again, that's where Irad and I met, working for one of the Endemol Shine companies.
And what benefit do you think having that background makes to your understanding of the industry and the challenges that face it?
I mean, from a post perspective, I can tell you that it's huge. When we started Quickture, which was roughly 2 years ago, one of the first things that we did was look at all the competition. And at that moment in time, there were dozens of, AI video editing companies out there. I won't name names, but we tested out and we downloaded and sort of like, tried out all of the different services that were out there. And what we realized very quickly was that none of these were actually solving the problems of editors and producers making the kinds of content that we were making, or reality TV, but not just reality TV, documentary, news, sports, scripted content. The vast majority were focused on how do I edit my social media content? How do I take a 30-minute podcast and turn that into, 5 30-second TikTok clips. And so, we realize that we do have this unique insight into, what actually happens in an edit room, how you actually put a story together. And I think that's what has, just served us really well and gotten us the traction that we've gotten.
I'll jump in, and I usually save this for the end of the pitch, but Erod is such a is such a unique individual in that he's lived this problem as a producer, okay, and the shows that he's created, Floor's Lava, Southern Charm, all the stuff that we did for Bravo. Um, he can have a conversation with any creative head about you know the creative and the actually making of a television show, and understands and talks that language quite comfortably, and has lived the problem, like much more so than I was a network executive, so I was the guy, basically asking production companies to do the
Matt
work.
sent notes,
And
lots of notes.
yeah, and then waiting for the notes to be addressed. Erod was actually in the edit, making those changes and addressing it. So he's lost the weekends to, the edit room, and midnight on a Saturday night looking for that perfect bite, etc. Um, so he lived the problem, and at the same time, and again, this is what I think makes him incredibly unique, is I don't even know where you've learned the language of computers and coding and all of this stuff, but like he can talk to a CTO, and the CTO would not know that he spent the last 25 years creating television and not working in this industry, which is, again, I think quite unique. So having a founder that can sit very comfortably in both of those worlds and has lived the world of the problem that we're trying to solve, I think makes him quite unique, and what we're doing hopefully unique as well.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about, for people who've never heard of it, what is Quickture?
Sure. So Quickture is a plugin for Avid Media Composer that lets you harness the power of AI to analyze and understand your footage, find the best moments, and get to a rough cut quickly. And that was really our goal from the very beginning, was to fit into people's existing workflows. Again, having worked in the industry for a long time, I have worked with many, many editors, who won't even change, like refuse to change the colors of their menus, right? The first thing they would do when they would come into the Avid room would be load up their personal settings. And so we knew that, given that, and given also just the challenges of the workflows. Once you have a workflow for a series, you don't want to change everything. So we knew we wanted to fit into the existing workflow, and that's why we were really interested in building Quickture for Media Composer, because that's where the majority of pro editors are working right now.
What do you think was the particular challenge that you were looking to solve? I mean, one of the challenges in something like reality television is, of course, massive shooting ratios and the
Yeah.
amount of material that people are having to deal with. But what was it really specifically that you thought that Quickture could actually solve for people in the industry?
I mean, that is what we wanted to solve. When you go into a show like a Real Housewives on Bravo, or something like that, you could easily have 100 hours of footage to create a 44-minute episode. And getting through that footage is grueling, intense, and also, very creative work. You're crafting a lot of these stories in the edit. Not to say that anything is faked, or you're making stuff up, but you need to figure out, okay, if I need to tell the arc of this argument or something like that, what's the best way to start it? How do we seed that in episode 2, and how do we pay it off? So you really do need to have an understanding of all of that footage, and working through that footage is, almost impossible. You basically have humans that are trying to keep 100 hours is one episode. You're trying to keep 1,000 hours of material in your head at the same time. And back in the day, you had binders of scripts, and, you had a giant board with all of your story elements and all the scenes and who was in it. And it was color coded by like the color of the card and then the stickers that are on it. And it's actually not humanly possible to do that, right? We're trying to basically be a database in our heads. And so Quickture was intended to solve that issue. How do I know what I need? How do I find it? Or I actually don't know what's here. How do I wrap my head around all of the material that's there, without having to take 10 weeks to just get started to sort of understand what's even in the material? So that's sort of where we started. The literal first place we started was with casting tapes. We thought, okay, that is a simple task. Let's see if the AI could help us take an hour-long interview and turn it into a 3-minute cut. It's also one of the most torturous things that you do in production or in editing, because you're faced with, you know, to cast a show with 6 characters, you might be doing 30 or 40 casting tapes or something like that. 20 of them totally suck, but you have to edit them anyway because no one's going to believe that they suck until you sort of show them the edited version. And so, it's pain points like that that we wanted to solve.
I don't think most people acknowledge or understand is that the time and the money constraint on all of this work is it just like hovers over. So like a showrunner, their job is to go get the story, to make sure that what you're capturing in the field is fantastic, and is worthy of putting together as a TV show. But they're also the people that are responsible for making sure that you're doing things on time, on a budget, right? So the clock is always ticking, and that's so true also in post. Like you don't have endless amounts of time. And so what I've always, and it's funny because it's a little bit personal for me, is like I'm always coming up with ideas, but the problem is I come up with ideas like sometimes too far down the line to do anything about, right? And so what you end up doing in post is you make these decisions, and then kind of backtracking from those decisions becomes very difficult because you're running out of time and you're running out of money. And so you were constantly, again, as a network executive, saying, "Hey, why don't we try this?" And they'd be like, "You know what? We'd love to try that, Matt, but are you willing to pay for an overage because we're, on a time?" So the time and money is always been a factor, that is a cloud that hangs over the process. And we think that Quickture allows that, because you're finding a lot of time, and you're building in efficiencies and productivity by getting to the rough cut way faster. It actually affords more creativity, time for creativity, trying different things, going down different paths. And so when you get that note that's, feels like it's late in the process, it may not be as hard to sort of put a rough assembly together to say, "Hey, you asked us if we could play that scene for humor. We did a quick pass with Quickture. Here's your, take a look." That type of stuff is I think I'm going a little bit deeper than the answer, but that stuff is, I think, really something that a value proposition that
Yeah.
Quickture does deliver on.
And also, just to jump in, that basically is the case with all kinds of editing. Until you have that rough assembly or that string out, you actually don't know what you have. And so we can get you to that point much more quickly.
I'll be honest, I'm still thinking about Behind the Music and pop-up video, which I watched religiously back in the day when they were, when they were on. But anyway, so that's awesome. One of the things too, Rod, that I think would be worth mentioning is now that the panel is available in Media Composer, can you talk a little bit about just the importance of having Quickture available in Media Composer, and then what that means to the workflow efficiencies that can be realized, right?
Yeah.
Now that it's, well integrated, and we're on, a few iterations here now, as to like what's possible. So maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in the days before the Panel SDK and Media Composer, we built a standalone app that allowed users to export an AAF and a WAV file from their sequence or their sync map, bring that into Quickture, do some editing. It would generate new AAFs that you could bring back into Media Composer, and it worked. But the revolution of the Panel SDK and having the ability to work within Media Composer, have the panel right there. I mean, it changes everything. It is an incredibly powerful thing to not have to do those 2 extra steps, because when you're editing, every single time you make a change, you're making decisions, and adding 1 step or 2 steps to every part of your process, that can, change your whole day. That can eat up a lot of time. So by being in the panel, Quickture really brings all that functionality right into Media Composer. So now I can ingest footage. It can happen sort of in the background. It could be processed while I'm working on another sequence. Right in the panel, I could see all of the activity that's going on, and I can check back in on Quickture sequences that need my attention. Oh, I need to label this one. It's still processing, or this one's ready to go. Now I can start making some edits, making some rough cuts. And that experience really transforms it. At NAB, we announced our Discuss features, which allows users to have a conversation about their footage. It's just like ChatGPT or another LLM right within your media composer, and having that right there, being able to ask questions or sort through, search through hundreds of hours of footage. It's very, very powerful to do right in Media Composer.
Yeah, and I think what I love about this usage of AI is the fact that you're driving efficiency, right? A lot of the AI that's out there, some people like to talk about how it's not maybe real yet, or it hasn't really delivered, whether it be on the, side of generating content, right? Generative AI or driving real efficiency, but that's simply not the case, right? I mean, this is absolutely driving not only cost savings, but real efficiencies in the workflow. And it's giving you what you said earlier, Rod, which is the ability to craft a script in reality TV where there really isn't a script. For those who may not know, be aware, right? Like reality TV doesn't have a script. You have to figure out what the storyline is. So maybe talk a little bit about some of those aspects too.
So in regards to sort of efficiencies and transforming the workflow today, Quickture can do that today. And by the way, right now, Quickture, all of the decisions, all the analysis that we do is based solely on the transcript. So we're helping people get to a story edit or a paper edit, a radio edit. But just that functionality alone is transformative. The CEO of ITV mentioned Quickture on her earnings call, and talked about how ITV used Quickture for casting for Love Island and was able to double the productivity. Editors were able to create twice as many casting tapes as they could in a given day. Now, what that meant was they could pull from a much bigger, they could pull from a much bigger net. Is that the phrase? They could pull from a much bigger pool of candidates and find better characters because they were able to look at many more candidates, double as many candidates. So that's sort of how it's transforming the work today. Now you're going to be able to search, search for visuals. You could say, give me all the shots of a red truck, but you could also say, edit this interview, look at the B-roll that I have, and slug in the good B-roll that would match or illustrate what the interview is saying. And so really, really transformative tools for sort of getting you a little bit further down the line in that rough assembly.
Matt, there was something you said earlier on that I wanted to pick up on, where we've talked about efficiency, and I think when you talk to anyone in the industry, everyone talks about efficiencies, and that's what's needed today. But one of the things that struck me about Quickture, and I think Irad, you've kind of alluded to this as well, is that actually what it's about enabling creativity. And I think, at Avid, I think that's one of the things that we're very passionate about is the creative way that people use our tools. So Matt, I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about, perhaps some examples of customers who are using it, but really that focus is around efficiency, but driving that creative process.
Our pitch is, this tool should allow you to actually create more content overall, right? So, and there's a couple of things. Love Island had a great summer, like a really great summer, and we were able to help the UK cast their show. Um, they're doing a show that's basically fast turnaround. They think they shoot it a day before and then it airs the next day, and they have to deploy an army of editors to do that, and to great expense. Um, we think Quickture can help lower the costs. But by the way, if we can lower the cost per episode, then maybe they can be doing more episodes, six more episodes, because no one was no one, everyone was bummed when Love Island ends. And so this idea that efficiency means less jobs, we think efficiency should mean more work and more creative work. And we're having those conversations right now. We're talking to networks about reversioning their library of content, for example, something that in the past without a tool like Quickshare would be almost impossible. But now you could go back in, load in an entire series, right, multiple seasons of an entire series, and do a supercut of just the scenes with the show's most popular character, and release that. If I went to a network and said, hey, I want to do a reversion and I want to do a whole series about this one character, the budget that you would have to put in front of the, it'd be an idea that maybe they would consider, but the budget would make it prohibitive. They wouldn't do it. So this idea of reversioning, this idea of doing fast turnaround and doing, and so I think what you'll see, the trend that you'll see next year, and it's also, by the way for these big companies to compete, right, against TikTok, against Snapchat, is to actually create more content that could live on social media, content, more episodes, breakout spin-off series. And if we can help lower the cost and provide a tool that allows it to do that more efficiently, I think we're going to see an uptick in the number of hours created. That's what we've been pitching, and it's being received quite well at the networks and the streamers.
And Irad, what's your experience of and feedback from editors who are actually using Quickture?
Once they wrap their head around how to use it, like any other tool, it takes a minute to figure out. The response is fantastic. Everybody loves it. The tasks that Quickture helps with are not the tasks that anybody loves to do. Watching through 3 hours of a scene to get it down to 1 hour, to get it down to 30 minutes, to ultimately the scene is going to be 2 minutes. Like the fun part is one, figuring out what's the story of it, right? What are the beats that I want to include? And then two, fine tuning it and getting the reaction shots. And so I'm talking from a reality TV perspective, but like the fun part is the big picture, the story and how we're going to tell it, and then doing the really creative work. It's not watching through many, many hours of footage and someone getting the battery changed on their mic and we're going to redo the take because the lighting changed or whatever, right? That's sort of the a necessity of the job. That's not the fun part of the job. And so we can help with that. The other thing, just looping back to what Matt said, you can do things that you just couldn't do. You couldn't it was impossible to do before. With a tool like Quickture, you'll be able to do it. One of the examples from reality TV is when we're doing a season of a Housewives show or Southern Charm or something like that, we're interviewing the cast constantly, right? Every week they are doing interviews. They used to come into the studio. Now they're doing them on their phones or whatever. We do a green screen. And so by the end, by 5 weeks, 10 weeks into the edit, you've got dozens of hours of interviews for all these characters. You're making them sort of answer the same questions over and over because you don't have the resources necessarily to go back and search through 30 hours of interviews. But with Quickture, you can, and maybe you could find these great bites. And it's the same thing with going back to old content. Currently, if you watch shows, maybe you'll flash back to a moment that occurred in a scene. Well, we're only looking at the finished episodes, right? You might have 15 seasons of 10 episodes each, but guess what? There's a ton of raw footage that still exists on a hard drive somewhere. If we could search through that, we could find gold. And so I think from a creative perspective, you just have a superpower that you didn't have before. You could do things that you could never do before, and that really unleashes your creativity. So editors, are very excited about that.
And I want to talk about the editors for a second as well. When I was a network executive and someone would send me a scene or a sizzle reel, and when I got out of my seat and pulled people into my office, I said, "You need to see this." Sometimes it was, a character, right? But I always tended to gravitate towards something that was well crafted and well edited. And so there's the joy and the fun and the oh my God of our industry is editor based. I think. I mean, I could be wrong. Finding a great character, coming up with a great format, all that stuff is really important. But what makes you go and pull someone into your office is like you got to see this, and it's because an editor crafted a scene or and again when I was doing a lot of development, a sizzle reel that just sang, and there's a joy and a fun in that. And the words joy and fun aren't things that you've heard recently coming from editors. And so we have heard people say it's making editing fun. It's making editing, it's bringing some joy back into this work because if you go back to what I was talking about before, that cloud of money and time, and by the way, and just workload, the workload is tremendous. And if we can help speed through the pain part and get to the joy part and the fun part, then I think we're doing our job.
It's not just editors, it's assistant editors. They're already doing a lot of the grueling work of organizing the footage and syncing it and things like that. Well, now you can get an instant accurate transcript without having to, you know, create an audio file, upload it to some other website, bring it down, bring it back into the system. We're doing that for you. It's all automated. So we're helping assistant editors and story producers as well. You could just try out, like Matt was saying, try out an idea very quickly before you sort of pass it on to the editors.
Well, so we've talked a lot about reality TV, all the benefits, and this being used in real productions, in Media Composer as a panel. This is all very exciting. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you see what you're making evolving for other genres within media, including sports, which I think has a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of gold to mine, not just in what's happening live, but certainly in historical libraries, which go back in some cases over 100 years, right, where they could find some real ways to monetize things that in the past they didn't even know they might have even had, right? Because they just don't have any metadata around it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So anytime you have fast turnaround, you require you need to edit the thing quickly, or you have a large amount of material, I think Quickture will be able to help. And sports is a perfect example. There's a game, you need to turn around highlights almost immediately. That's something that Quickture can help with. Or going back to archival, what if I could go back and search through hundreds of hours of material while a game is happening, find some relevant play or commentary or something like that, and put that into the broadcast. That's a very, very powerful tool to have. So we're excited about sports. I mean, we're excited about even corporate video departments. They have a large volume. They might do a conference and they're filming all day for several days, and now they have to come back and a small team has to assemble a lot of footage quickly. So we can help with that as well. And I would also mention that we're working with a couple of big broadcast networks on scripted. And scripted also has a similar sort of situation. Editor gets the dailies from the set. They get the script notes with all the circle takes, and the first job is just assembling those circle takes. Quickture can do that assembly for you in about 2 or 3 minutes, and now you can get to solving the problems that they didn't realize were occurring on the set. They circled that take, but it doesn't exactly work with the incoming shot or whatever, and now you can start fixing that stuff, and you're not sort of functioning as kind of a machine just putting these pieces together. You can get to the creative part quickly.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask a little bit about is you talked earlier on about the value of the panel, and that you designed a standalone tool, but then the panel came along and it's enabled other things. It's a more general question about how important do you think it is for Avid to be open to have the kind of panel workflows that are now being enabled that didn't exist in the past? What difference do you think that can make to just the industry generally and workflows that can be enabled not just by Avid, but by partners such as Quickture?
I think it's amazing and incredible and great being able to extend the functionality of a tool that you rely on. And that already has a lot of functionality all the functionality that you need for a lot of the kinds of editing. If you can extend that, that also is a superpower. We decided early on to build Quickture within Avid because we didn't want to figure out codecs and how to do the titles and how all the different ways of transitions, right? You guys have already solved that problem. And so now if you can allow developers to just extend and build on that foundation, I think a lot of incredible things are going to come from that.
So, Matt, just to talk a little bit from maybe from a business perspective, so Irad's talked about some of the new functionality that's coming. What are the business opportunities you think that exist for Quickture, and where do you see, your company going in the next few months and years?
So obviously, we started with the media and entertainment world community because that was our world. Those are the people that we knew. We also recognize that that community is prickly and they're difficult because they're discerning and they want the best of the best. And so, if we could solve the problems for the hardest and by the way, and incredibly talented editors and
It's safe.
producers. If we could solve the problem for them, if we can fix their world, then it would be, I guess, easier to sort of then transition to corporate video, um, and also. So I think, and by the way, corporate video is a massive opportunity for us right now. we talk a lot about most of the video that you see from influencers and creators are stand-ups, like they're in front of a restaurant or they're shopping or they're just talking direct to camera. They're doing stand and stir cooking shows, they're doing restaurant review shows, they're doing talk shows. Those are the types of shows that were early reality TV. When they start to get more ambitious, and they will, and by the way, Mr. Beast is the perfect example. Mr. Beast just had a big enough audience to go to Amazon and say, give me the biggest budget ever for a reality TV show, and he got it. So God bless him. But for everyone else in that world, um, a tool that allows them to be more ambitious about format and about storytelling. So if an influencer wants to create her version or his version of the Kardashians or the Housewives, having a tool like Quickture and not having to employ an army of editors and take weeks and weeks and weeks to stay on budget. So we think that is another massive opportunity for Quickture. And really it's to inspire them to elevate the type of programming that they're creating. And so that you're going to see, and we really believe this, you're going to see formats coming out of the influencer world, to an exponential. So right now there's a lot of podcasting kind of being videoed. We think they're going to create TV shows very, very soon. And the TV shows will span a bunch of different genres. So between corporate video and social media influencers, that seems to be the next two big opportunities for Quickshare.
I just want to jump onto that for 1 second, which is that production in many ways has been sort of solved. We all have like a very good camera in our pocket. We can all get a drone. Post production is going to have this massive influx of people that now are, shooting great video from all over the place. But that editing process has still not been democratized in the same way. And so we want to be a big part of that.
One more thing. As a former gatekeeper, right? I was a network executive. You had to come to me and convince me to put your TV show on the air, right? As a former gatekeeper to the kingdom, right, of getting a show on a cable television network, I can tell you that most of the gatekeepers, I mean, they're all smart people, but no one really knows. No one knows what's going to be popular next. And so the gatekeepers, because they have a budget, they have to, they get to make some choices. They have to make choices, but like their choices are most of the time not right. Um, it's fun to think about with production tools like Quickture and working within Avid, and with the distribution not being gatekept because you can just send out your TV show anywhere now. Things like we believe there's like a golden age, another golden age coming, for content.
Yeah, one thing I really love about the times that we've spoken today and the times we've spoken before to both of you is the amazing passion that you both clearly have for the industry and the passion that you have for the tool, and it really comes across. So just as a final thought, so Matt, we get back together, and Irad, we get back together in 6 months' time. What are we going to be talking about then from Quickture?
Well, this visual analysis, we actually have to come up with a good name for it. So if anyone wants to put in the chat some suggestions, but the ability to understand the visual content along with the dialogue is transformative and really cool and is going to open people up to all kinds of creative ways to use Quickture. So we're really excited about that. The other very big thing that we're working on, and this is sort of a paradigm in AI technology, sort of startups and just the whole industry, is the idea of tool use. Is that you have an AI and then you tell it, here are some tools that you can use to accomplish things that you want to accomplish. So for example, our visual analysis really uses a tool. Well, there's a lot of tools, but it has the option to say, I need to find a shot. And now it could go and use a find a shot tool to look at a bunch of footage and find the shots relevant to what the user asked for or what the AI thinks it needs. We want to expand that out to a bunch of different tools. One of the big things that we want to do is expand it out so that Quickture can use tools within Avid Media Composer. So that if I say, hey, I want you to slug in a title card, after every character enters the scene, it'll be able to do that. Or if I said, I need you to, put transitions whenever put some crossfades wherever the audio seems a little rough. And it would be able to do that. So being able to harness the tools that exist with inside within Media Composer, I think is also going to be really, really cool. So we're excited about that.
And from my perspective, we're now being fully deployed on actual, in the production of big shows, big formatted shows, name brand shows that you would know, that we can't talk about, but that you would know. So being deployed in those production workflows in the fall, and having some use cases built from those examples and from some of those shows, I think will only kind of continue our story in a very positive way. I also think that what I just talked about in terms of corporate video and in social media influencers, having some concrete examples of what that of when they've been able to use Quickture to elevate their content, I think that you'll see that in the next 6 months as well.
Fantastic. And I know that we are both really excited about the partnership as well.
Yeah, and one just other thing I'll mention is if you viewers who are watching this right now want to take advantage of this, you do need to upgrade to the latest and greatest Media Composer so you can use the panel and realize some of these efficiencies you're hearing about. And yes, the partnership's fantastic, and I'm so glad that we stuck with it, and here we are, and I'm looking forward to the future too. So it's really exciting.
So thanks to Irad and Matt for taking us through all of that. And Ray, this is only one of many panels that are under development for Media Composer, right?
That is true, Craig. Yes, there's literally hundreds of companies building panels currently for Media Composer. There are about 30 that are out there in the wild in real production scenarios being used as we speak. And Quickture is certainly one of those. So we're very excited to have them as a panel because the interest there is super high. You can check out the QR code that's on the screen now to find out more, or go to the Avid website for the latest and greatest information.
Yep, and you can also get some more details in the show notes as well. And throughout the season, we are going to be finding out a lot more about solutions to solve the challenges of post-production, sports, and news. And in fact, next up on Making the Media, we are going to be hearing from Hussein Zaishakiri from Spectra Logic. So let's get a sneak peek at what he has to say.
Flexibility and being able to pivot is the name of the game. I mean, that's a path to survival.
What kind of challenges were you trying to solve?
It's all about storytelling.
Projects and bins and sharing.
Everybody's looking for greater efficiency.
That really is what it's all about.
The industry is changing, and it's changing fast.
Lots of great information to come then, really driving home all the great new efficient workflows now possible through the panel in Media Composer.
Yeah, exactly right, Ray. So that's all from episode 1. It's great to be back. For now, I'd like to thank Matt and Irad for joining us. Thanks to Matt Diggs, our producer. Thanks to you, Ray. Of course, great to have you on board. But most of all, thanks to you for taking the time to join us. Come back and join us again next time for more of the people making the media.